I think about Outer Wilds every single day. Be that remembering the simultaneously fun yet stressful times I had exploring the universe, reflecting on the ideas the game taught me, like that despite things feeling out of my control, it's okay to take a step back and let things take their course. But mainly, it's just that different songs will make their way onto my daily music rotation. Sometimes I want to feel chill and put on the Timber Hearth theme. Other times, I like to think about the amazing friends I've made doing online content, so Travelers is perfect for that. Or maybe it's an introspective time. 14.3 billion years will do the trick. This game is one of the few constants in my life and has been since hitting the credits for the first time a couple of years ago. In fact, as of writing this, all major music platforms put their wraps out, and my stats for the Outer Wilds soundtrack is a little unhinged, as you can see here. It's safe to say Outer Wilds changed my life. Not in any massive dramatic fashion, not in a way that completely altered the trajectory of who I am or who I'm going to be, but in more subtle ways. I ended my last video about how I still don't really like video game soundtracks despite my love of a few, and since then that has changed. I've opened myself up to a massive plethora of music I never would have before, and while that might not seem like a big deal, it is to me. Music is the most important media in my life. I consume it significantly more than anything else. So to have something that makes me change my viewpoint like that is exceptionally meaningful in some ways. This change was a reason I was so excited to dig into the DLC for the game. Mainly, it was to see more of the galaxy and what a new mystery could possibly be, but a large chunk of that excitement was about some new music to hear for the first time in wild new contexts. When I played through Echoes of the Eye, the DLC for Outer Wilds, I swore I wouldn't make a video about it, even though there were a ton of people saying when I got around to beating it to please talk about the soundtrack. As I was playing, I didn't really feel like there was enough to talk about. Sure, the music is just as amazing, but that kind of would have been the end of it. Maybe some new references to different styles of music for a different universe of inhabitants, but not enough to really say anything that meaningful that would justify a full video. But the longer I sat on it, the less sense this started to make. Echoes of the Eye takes a drastic turn in tone, as composer Andrew Pralo explains in an interview I had with him recently.
I basically said, and like the way that it was pitched to me was that Echoes of the Eye had to sit in the madness, and it happened to kind of time out right with real life because like we basically went into lockdown. Like when I started writing for Echoes, I think I was a couple months in, and then we went into lockdown. So it was like some of that stuff I felt like really came from life experience of like being locked in my place, like by myself for months on end, you know? And we had to get really, like, I basically was getting really dark with it. Like that's what Alex, the creative director, talked about, how we're going to kind of make it cosmic horror.
If Outer Wilds is an exercise in self-reflection, then its DLC, Echoes of the Eye, is what happens when it looks back at you. As Pralo said, it's a descent into madness, a cosmic horror, where the base game's horror comes from the crushing anxiety of making things right in time before the sun implodes, and while that time constraint is still in place, the horror is more tangible. There are things actively out to get you. With the connective tissue of the game being music, the soundtrack needed to reflect this change.
So the main thing I had to figure out how to do is bridge the old music style into kind of like slowly introduce it so it's not jarring.
One of my favorite moments with a game in recent years came after just finding the stranger. Cautiously proceeding forward through its interior gate, the coolest reveal happens, which is the appearance of the river. You are jolted down in the pitch black only to be greeted by a sprawling, curling vista. It's a moment that rivals blowing open the Sun Station hatch for the first time, a far cry from anything else you've seen in this game previously. If it wasn't for rushing river rapids and the impending doom of the sun exploding, it would seem tranquil, almost serene in its surrealness. And the song that starts playing almost immediately accompanies this moment perfectly.
When you're approaching the stranger, it's like really ominous and dark. But then when you drop down into the river, like I kind of like start introducing like the new Traveler instrument, and like kind of I'm using the banjos and stuff and like acoustic guitars. Like it's sort of like the river is Echoes of the Eye's Timber Hearth, where it kind of sets the tone, but like it's kind of like a little bit darker, and like I'm using like different tunings. Like it's basically like an altered tuning of the first Outer Wilds tuning by like in minor, and that's where like River's End comes in, where it's like I'm playing kind of the same riff but in minor key instead of major key.
The River is by far my favorite song in the entire Outer Wilds catalog now. I don't know if that's because it's a perfect tone setter for what's to come, or that it's just a banger, or a combination of the two. But one thing's for sure, it gives the stranger one hell of a first impression. There's a few reasons the song works so well. The first being that it sounds familiar. Its first sound of instrumentation is a plucking guitar alternating, something fans of the game have heard many times before. But the second reason comes in shortly after it starts. It rises in a way that almost sounds desperate, just like you are. Someone who is brought into an awe-inspiring landscape only to be suddenly met with the immediate danger of your situation in a raft rushing down rapids. The third and final reason is its unfamiliarity later on. The mysterious instrument representing the strange new place. It sounds like a theremin at first, but it's more synthy than that. It's foreign, reflecting the place you've entered. It's a rush of 3 things all within the space of a couple of minutes. Just enough time for you to gather your bearings and begin exploring.
I don't totally know. It's like kind of called a Bayou slide guitar, but I don't even know if that's the official name. But the guy, I bought it from this dude in New Orleans. Like I was down there for Voodoo Fest, which doesn't exist anymore, but it was like the weekend before Halloween. And this guy was selling these like made out of like old doors from like the 40s and 50s and stuff. So I'm just like, it's probably a haunted door guitar, honestly. And like, so I bowed this and then put it over the guitar loop, but then I kind of combined this with the sound of like playing a Moog, but I like messed with it a lot to make it sound all old and worn out. And sort of like combining those sounds together is that like it ended up sounding kind of like a theremin, but it's not. It's just like those 3 things combined. And it ended up sounding very theremin-y because I kind of am like sliding around on the Moog and stuff.
Echoes of the Eye as an expanded expedition for your adventures is reflected by the song The River in a lot of ways. It starts familiar. Despite its new location, you were doing a lot of what came before this, exploring and piecing things together. But as things escalate, you realize there's a sense of urgency beyond a dying sun. There's a very real terror that trembles underneath. And as you delve deeper into this strange new land, echoing yourself between the stranger and the Grove of the Watchers, the urgency of being chased hits you. Finally, the prisoner, someone you must bring out to the end with you, his haunting instrument follows you around as you explore and uncover more than you could have ever been anticipating. Something that surprised me as I explored the soundtrack more for this video, and it's something I wish I clocked while playing it, but frankly I was a little too on edge to realize, was just how nostalgic sounding some of the songs are. The inhabitants are trapped, a people stuck in their own loop, unable to be set free, and the 80s style synth, a crackling echo under a lot of the songs found on The Stranger. A sense of freedom and stasis as their bodies fade but their memories remain, pairs perfectly with this kind of euphoric despair. Unlike the base game, while traversing The Stranger and finding its language dotted around the place, your translator is useless here. Communication from the Alps is equally audible as it is visual. Since a lot of the background is uncovered through the reels found around the decaying wreckage, the music really needs to punctuate the visuals. The reels are the Alps' version of Know My Text strewn about the universe. They play a slideshow story of events that led to them looking for the eye of the universe. And The Premonition, the song that plays as you observe these memories, is the perfect encapsulation of a desperate plea. The songs that are, at times, as broken as the people and the reels are themselves. While physically seeing the images play out slowly tells you the story, the music gets across the deeper emotion of the situation. What makes this even more effective and hit harder is when the images are shown on the projector and clear and easy to see the music is, while eerie, still clear and easy to hear. As soon as a burnt out slide appears, no matter how long it takes you to get there, the music shifts to its broken state. The first time this happened, it hits you like a sudden shiver down your spine, when you get a bad feeling but don't quite know why. It connects the player to just how dire things were here on The Stranger long before you arrived. Connectivity through music and the memories melodies leave us with is the core of Outer Wilds, the glue that holds the experience together. And I didn't think it was possible for Prilo to top his work within the game for what the soundtrack could mean to me and so many others. And then I heard The Lost Reels, Prilo's self-released EP.
Because Outer Wilds is done, and like it felt like feels like losing a lot of friends when you're with those characters for so long, and there's kind of this like empty space in my heart for it, and I felt like really empty at the time. I was like, well, like this is weird. Like I'm not working on this anymore, and I had been working on it for almost 10 years at that point. So I ended up like working out to where like I just like could pull out all the stops and like just kind of write a record based on my thoughts and feelings of Outer Wilds and how much it meant to me and how much the community meant to me, and kind of like giving back to them for like, because really the success is all from the fans, and like the music like has really taken a life on its own afterwards. And like, so it's cool to like kind of write whatever I wanted and like not have any constraints within the game or within the styles, and I could kind of like add strings and like do all this crazy stuff that didn't fit the game but works as a piece of music on its own. So it's kind of like writing a record that is Outer Wilds and kind of what it means to me looking back.
If I asked you what an album released for a video game would be, I'm willing to bet it would just be the soundtrack ripped and put onto either a vinyl record, maybe a CD, or just an audio file put online. And yeah, that's what most are, and it's fine. A lot of people want to experience their favorite songs on the go, or have an easily accessible means to listen to that one song from that one moment again without playing a game for 30 hours just to hear it. But what if you took the idea of a gaming soundtrack a step further? Well, that's what Andrew Prolo did with both the base game of Outer Wilds with his reprise of the original soundtrack, but more impressively an entire EP called The Lost Reels, which is a compilation and retelling of music not only from Echoes of the Eye, but also some moments within Outer Wilds base as well. I've made it no secret that music is important in Outer Wilds. From a storytelling perspective, it ties the entire game together with motifs and even down to character moments with the Traveler's theme. As I said, the connective tissue of the game is music. What the Lost Reels EP does is take that tissue, disconnects it from the core and reassembles it in a new way, maintaining a lot of the essence, moments and memories from what we all love about Outer Wilds and makes it something new. Another thing that makes Outer Wilds so special isn't just the experience you have with the game. To me, that was only half of it. The other half was yelling at my friends both as I played and as I finished. Games in general are better experiences as a collective. It's why me and so many others love to make videos about them. An experience is made stronger and deepens our connections with it and the people around us as we tell our stories. The Lost Reels isn't only a retelling of Outer Wilds, it's also a representation of what the game means and how we tell our own stories of the adventure of a lifetime that lasts 22 minutes. Like songs played around a campfire, each person will have their own take on how they manage to piece it all together. But at the end of the day, the spirit of the songs, of the stories, and of the moments that mean so much are there. It's just how you get to that point will define which get the spotlight on your rendition. There's a reason Outer Wilds music means so much to the people that have played it, and a reason it will continue to mean something to those who will play it. And the Lost Reels is just another set of songs played around a crackling fire, a way to relive the time spent with our long lost friends, and a new way to catch up. As a front-to-back listening experience, it's extremely cathartic. While it's self-described as a reprise of the Echoes of the Eye soundtrack, since the motifs from the base game carried over, it feels like a reprise of the entire game. It's hard to pin this EP down in a genre. It crosses so many in such a seemingly short span of time. It hits all the right moments of musical reprieve when it needs to. The penultimate song, Hearth's Shadow, has my new favorite rendition of the Timber Hearth theme. It's slower, it's reflective, and the way it strums out in its own thing is the exact style before looping into a low drone as if the planet itself is being pulled into the black hole of the sun. Reminds you that despite the comfort of home, all things still end. During the song The Spirit of Water, after 2 minutes and 14 seconds of overlapping stringed melodies seemingly battle for the spotlight, a loud bass cracks the rising dissonance, eventually slowing to a familiar tune with familiar instruments. Among the wall of distorted sounds, harmony is still able to make itself known. Among the crushing anxiety of the universe ending, peace is still able to be found. Everything is connected. As said in the description on YouTube for the EP, when I finished writing the music for Echoes, these characters felt like friends I'd never see again. It has been a wonderful experience to enter their world again and revisit them. Lost Reels jumps headfirst into the Outer Wilds idea of an existential awakening, as well as the alternative Echoes of the Eye touches on, a descent into madness. While Echoes of the Eye was made during lockdown, I played Outer Wilds base game to completion for the first time during Auckland's lockdown at the back end of 2021. Was seeing people call the downloadable content their game of the year. A lot of media I consumed in this time feels intrinsically tied to that feeling I had of hopelessness back then. And so it's fitting that the two games that meant the most to me while I was stuck inside for 107 days were a replay of Majora's Mask and my completion of Outer Wilds. Two games about being trapped in a time loop searching for answers and a way out. It helped keep me grounded. Outer Wilds was a way to connect with friends who had beaten the game, an excuse to reach out to people and strike up a conversation in time of isolation, even for a quick catch-up between screaming about discoveries I was making. Much like how the Lost Reels exist as a revisit to the universe with old friends, a catch-up, and a reminder that despite the adventure being over, they will always be there, the community has kept the spirit of the game alive through covers. Video game covers are something that can keep a game alive long after the game stopped being supported. In fact, some covers can even bring a game to prominence. A good example of this in my mind is Undertale. Undertale is a game that blew up on word of mouth, and part of that conversation was the music. Shortly after its explosive success, many games-related musicians had their careers made off the back of some covers of the game. That idea also extends to Outer Wilds. There's an entire community that celebrates the soundtrack via covers that span almost every genre you can think of, from synthwave to doom metal. It makes sense that a game that, at its heart, is about the connections we make and how music can bring us closer, incubated a covers community around its soundtrack. I'm not sure if the musicians themselves are connected, but I see Prilo in the comments a lot, and like nomadic space travelers, many familiar faces will pop up across the board, people sharing what the songs mean to them, where they were when they played the game, how they've grown in the years since finishing that adventure to figure out why a son is dying. And I think there's a reason for this. We love to share our experiences. We love to find connections with others while also finding new media that celebrates what we love in new and increasingly unique ways. There are a lot of Outer Wilds covers out there, all of them fantastic in their own rights, but I want to speak on 3 that really struck a chord with me and why that is. Outer Wilds Goes Punk by Trace Yates is an extremely distilled version of the essence of Outer Wilds. As I mentioned in my last video, the bass soundtrack is very Midwest inspired, and a genre that is cut from the same cloth is punk rock. They share a lot of the same audience, the same ideals. While sonically this cover is very chaotic, you can feel Outer Wilds in its melodies. As a game, it's frantic, but also emotional, and this rendition hits that on the head perfectly. Josh Lee's post-metal cover of Elegy for the Rings is an experience as intense as the DLC itself. The original has a very foreign feel to it on purpose, using instruments exclusive to the stranger itself, with some overdriven bass underneath it, creates an eerie soundscape worthy of the inhabitants. So what better than a post-doom metal cover to capture that sound, but with crushing guitars. Post and doom metal are genres known for their slow builds, moving from simple riffs to a crushing weight of sound within minutes, all while weaving harmonic melodies in between. The single string plucking moving to chord progression and open strums, it's an extremely faithful recreation of the original song. Lee also pulls off the best use of an in-game soundbite I've ever heard in this cover. Third is Amy Waters' synthwave rendition of The Traveler's Theme. This feels almost like an official rearrangement, as if in an alternative universe where synths were used in the base game for the main themes. It's so poignant in how it not only hits the somber notes, but also how she riffs off on her own in a way that feels completely natural, like she herself is part of the Outer Wilds venture company and had a hand in writing the original theme. The thing that every cover, not just the ones I've mentioned, captures is that they recreate how it feels to hear the songs for the first time, a way to memorialize an experience for yourself and for others. Since the game itself revolves and relies on music so much to tell its story, it's obviously going to speak to and even inspire people to learn how to play it. Even if a cover is just a one-for-one recreation, it's still bringing something new to the table. Someone's own passion and drive to want to share a memory, a way to put their own sound into the universe.
Growing up, I was like, how can I write like what would be like my version of the Damn It riff, but for video games? And that's like how I thought about it. It's like simple and catchy and fun to play, and tons of people can have fun messing with it and rearranging it. Because I feel like a lot of the most iconic video game music is like, there's so many arrangements of it because it's so malleable and so easy to learn, but you can mess with it and turn it into a million different things, and everyone can kind of make it their own, which is like the whole point of music to begin with, is to like have a voice. So it's cool that people can like channel this into their own musical voice and like make these covers and like treat it as their own.
A descent into madness is the perfect line for a post-Outer Wilds feeling. Like my own spiral is connected to how I can never replay this game again, at least not properly. I know how to move the universe forward. The lost reels, countless covers, and even just the original soundtracks itself are ways to experience and revisit familiar places without having to pick up a controller. This game means a lot to me, and as time goes on, begins to mean even more. I know I am not alone in this feeling. I think every fan of the game can relate in some way. I mean, that is in part why so many covers exist. We're all connected. We all wish for a way to relive an experience we can never have again. And for as long as I can, I hope I never stop thinking about Outer Wilds.